You'd better get on this overheating job right away, Jeff. Mr. Miller wants it by tomorrow noon at the latest.
Cooling system trouble, eh, Dan? Gosh, we haven't had one of these jobs in a long time. How bad is it overheating?
He said it goes up to 210 on the gauge when he stops for a light.
Well, Dan, there's only a little time left tonight, so I'll check it over for leaks and look at the water pump, okay?
Fine, Jeff. We'll get at the main job together first thing in the morning.
Hello, Jeff.
Hiya, Tech.
What's the matter, pal? Cooling system trouble?
Yeah, and this looks like a tough one, Tech.
Well, why don't you go home and sleep on it, Jeff? Maybe the cooling system will sort itself out in your sleep.
Good idea, Tech. See you in the morning.
Hey, Jeff. Can you hear me, Jeff?
Yeah, Tech, what's up?
I brought my friend Hank the Tank to see you. He's a complete cooling system, Jeff.
Hello, Jeff.
Hello, Hank.
Maybe I can help you sort out your ideas for tomorrow, Jeff.
Say, that's swell, Hank. Go ahead.
Well, you know, of course, that a car needs a cooling system to carry off the excess heat the engine produces.
Sure, Hank.
To do this, the water in the system must circulate. That's why I have a water pump.
Right, Hank. Without your pump, the water wouldn't move the heat away from the block fast enough to keep it cool. Now, tell him how the pump works, Hank.
Okay, Tech. If you could see inside there, you'd notice my impeller turning on the same shaft as the fan. As the water comes through the inlet, the impeller drives it into the engine block by way of the outlet. Then the water distributor tube takes it from the pump and directs the cool water around the exhaust valve seats where the engine gets hottest. Then it circulates around in the full-length water jacket and comes out the head and by the thermostat. You know what the thermostat does, Jeff.
I think so. It sort of regulates the flow of water according to the heat of the engine, doesn't it?
Yeah, but tell him how, Hank.
Right, Tech. Mine is a bypass thermostat, Jeff. It stops the circulation of the water through the radiator when the car is warming up, and here's how. When the thermostat valve is closed, the water comes out of the head, goes through this bypass back to the water pump, where it is pushed into the block again.
So it goes round and round in the engine, keeping uniform heat distribution throughout the block. When the temperature gets up around 160 degrees, things begin to happen.
My thermostat is held closed all this time by a partial vacuum in its bellows, but there's a liquid inside that builds up vapor pressure as the temperature rises. Around 160 degrees, this increase in vapor pressure forces the bellows to expand, and that opens the valve, letting the water start to circulate through the radiator. The thermostat gradually opens as the temperature of the water rises, allowing more and more water to flow through the radiator. In extremely hot weather, the water reaches 180 degrees, at which time the thermostat is wide open.
You see, Jeff, when the thermostat gradually opens, this apron just as gradually blocks off the bypass. This cuts down the flow of water back into the engine. And as the water flows through the core of the radiator, it gets cooled.
Now, my core is the cellular type. It's made up of a lot of hollow water passages. If they were transparent, you'd see the water going down like this. The heat is transferred to the sides of the passage and then to those spacers you see coming off the sides. They give the air plenty of chance to take the heat away as it goes through the core. Of course, the fan helps pull the air through the core too, especially when the car is idling. Just remember, Jeff, the water is hot and the metal must carry that heat to the air. If anything gets in the way of this heat transfer, like bugs or dirt in the air holes of the core, or rust or scale clogging the inside of the passage, either of these conditions can keep the heat from being transferred to the air and your engine will overheat.
Can't the thermostat cause overheating?
No, sir. There's one part of my system that's always getting blamed, but very seldom causes any trouble.
Well, what other things will cause you to get hot and bothered, Hank?
Why, low water level caused by external leaks, for instance, and internal leaks, too. Then there might be a loose fan belt or water pump trouble, but most of the time it's a clogged core. Now, let me tell you all about these troubles, young fellow. In the first place,
Hiya, Jeff. How far did you get yesterday?
Well, I checked the hose connection for leaks. I even looked inside one of the hoses to see if it was rotted.
Good, Jeff. A hose can look all right, but if the inside is rotted, pieces may break off and clog the system.
Then I checked around the water pump for leaks.
Are you sure the water pump is working?
Yeah, I took off the bypass elbow and pushed a screwdriver in there. Then I turned the shaft to see if the impeller was tight on it, and it was.
That's fine. You see, if the impeller pin shears off, the water pump can't circulate the water, so then the engine will overheat. In that case, the pump must be removed and overhauled. There are special tools for this job, and the whole story is in the reference book.
Hiya, boys. Find any leaks?
Not a one, Tech. The expansion plugs are tight, the head gasket is tight. There's not even a rust stain to show up any leaky solder joints or pinholes in the radiator.
How about the fan belt tension, Jeff? You know, if it's too loose, the belt might slip and slow down the impeller so the water won't circulate as fast as it should.
Yeah, and the fan won't pull enough air through the cord to cool the water either.
It's got about a 1/4-inch play, Tech.
Well, that's okay. Take a look at this typical cooling system while we're turning the record, folks.
Well, fellas, it looks like the usual trouble, a clogged radiator.
Yeah, but how are you going to check it to be sure?
One way you can definitely tell is to plug both inlet and outlet connections. Then, fill the radiator up and leave the filler cap off. Now, when I remove the bottom plug, if the water flows in a spout of about 5 or 6 inches, the core is okay. This one only spouts an inch or so. Your core is definitely plugged all right.
Well, that means the radiator cleaner is in order, right?
Wait a minute, boys. How about reverse flushing the radiator first?
What for, Tech?
Well, it should loosen up dirt and scale at the top of the core so the cleaner can circulate and do its job.
Right, Tech. Here, take this reverse flush gun, Jeff, and fit it into a piece of hose attached to the lower outlet of the radiator. Now, before you start, have a longer hose attached to the upper inlet so you won't get rust and dirt all over the engine.
And don't forget to leave the radiator cap on for the same reason.
Right, Tech. Now, Jeff, as you work the gun, be sure to use the air pressure carefully so you won't blow open any soldered joints in the core.
Sort of give it little jolts of air rather than steady pressure, Jeff. Too much pressure might damage the core.
I see, Tech. How long do you keep it up?
Until the water runs clear. It's okay now, I guess.
Now the cleaner, right, Dan?
Okay, Jeff. Put it in and run the engine at a fast idle, and I'll be back later when you drain her. All set, Jeff?
Right, Dan. Ready to drain her out. You open the petcock on the radiator while I drain the block.
Watch this hose, fellas, to see that she doesn't overflow. Remember the instructions on the cleaner can.
Okay, Tech. What's next, Dan? The neutralizer?
Right, Jeff. Just follow the instructions on the can and don't forget to drain her. Well, that's about it, Jeff, except for the rust resistor.
Right, fellas. If your customer had used that in the first place, you wouldn't have had this job on your hands. You know, I'm glad you didn't jump on the thermostat as the cause for overheating.
There's one chance in a million, like when a thermostat blows up and plugs the opening. But that's because something else caused overheating first.
That's right. When a thermostat is closed, it's because the valve is being held down by a partial vacuum in the bellows. If the bellows leaks in any way, there isn't any vacuum to hold it closed any longer, and the thermostat must stay open.
In fact, if you leave the thermostat out of a car with a bypass system, it will run hotter than normal.
Sure thing. The uncovered bypass hole would suck some of the water right back into the engine, and she would run at a higher temperature.
Yeah, but you do test the thermostat when your engine is running too cold. You see, when you first start the car in the winter, if your thermostat opens too soon, you'll decrease your engine efficiency and you won't get enough heat for the heater, all because your engine is running too cold.
There's a lot of tips in the reference book about how to get the most out of your heater. But if you're checking the thermostat, you should suspend it in water that's heating. But don't let it touch the bottom, or it'll heat up faster than the water.
Then you watch to see if it's wide open at about 180 degrees.
Yeah, but a high opening thermostat will be wide open at about 200 degrees. Well, suppose this was a water loss job, fellas. What would you look for?
Why, a leaky cylinder head gasket, for one thing, causing a compression leak.
Yes, or an air leak on the suction side of the pump.
How would they cause water loss?
They'd both displace water in the block and force it out the overflow pipe.
Air in the system causes more rust, too. You know, it takes both air and water to make rust.
Well, how can you tell the difference between a compression leak and an air leak?
First, you attach a hose to the end of the overflow pipe and run it into a jar of water.
Yeah?
Then you start the engine and give her the gun a couple of times. That's so you can see if bubbles are coming from the hose. If they are, you'd know it was either of the two leaks.
But, Jeff, how would you know which leak it was?
Why, you loosen the fan belt to stop the water pump. Then, you gun the motor again and take another look at the jar. If you still see bubbles, you'd know it couldn't come from the pump anymore, so it would have to be a compression leak.
Well, what would cause that?
Why, it could be a blown head gasket, as I said, or maybe even a cracked block.
But suppose the bubbles stopped when you loosened the fan.
Then you'd know the water pump was sucking air from a loose hose connection on the suction side.
Good work, fellas.
You know, Tech, if a cooling system is taken care of regularly, all this work wouldn't have to be done.
Yeah, if this car had been in much worse shape, it would have been a job for a radiator repair shop.
What should we do to prevent this trouble?
Well, always keep the water about an inch from the top, for one thing, to allow room for expansion without going out the overflow pipe.
About this cleaner, Dan, the time to use it is when you first see rust around. Then the cleaner works easily and thoroughly.
Yeah, Tech. And then there's the antifreeze solutions that have a harmful ingredient like sugar, salt, or mineral oil. These will hurt your engine if you use them.
And before you put in a permanent type antifreeze, check carefully for leaks. That stuff will sneak out of the smallest hole.
And in the spring, add rust resistor to keep the whole system rust-proof. In warm climates, you ought to use the resistor twice a year.
And that's the whole story, fellas.
But don't blame me for everything, folks. It could be a plugged exhaust, late timing, high altitudes, or heavy loads that cause overheating. And maybe it's the indicator that's off. I might not be overheating at all. So to be sure, check the water in my tank.
But remember, everybody, if a cooling system is overheating with a full radiator, it's probably one of these things: a faulty water pump, a clogged core, or some obstruction in the radiator air holes. So keep the system clean and circulating, and your headaches will be few and far between.